Rishi Sunak, 60,399. Liz Truss, 81,326. Therefore, I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. We'll come up on stage.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy.
Britain is finally getting a new Prime Minister to succeed Boris Johnson. The Conservative Party has chosen Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak to lead the UK government. Truss won the race with over 81,300 votes versus Rishi Sunak, who won nearly 60,400 votes. Making her victory speech, Truss said she campaigned as a Conservative and will work as a Conservative. She assured of a bold plan to cut taxes and grow the economy. She also promised to deliver on the energy crisis and also pledging to deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. So what lies ahead for Liz Truss? How will UK's policies shape towards India and the prospects of a free trade deal by Diwali? What will UK's stance be towards Ukraine and Russia? And what does this really mean for Rishi Sunak's political career? Joining me now to take this forward, I'm joined by John Kampfner, Executive Director at Chatham House, Adam Drummond, Associate Director and Partner, Opinium Research. Also joining us are Nigel Fletcher, Political Historian at King's College London, and writer and columnist Farooq Dhondi. Adam, if I can begin with you. For the last few weeks, it had been clear that it is Liz Truss who is in the driver's seat and not Rishi Sunak. How did the polls and the mood within the Conservatives start changing towards Liz Truss? What went wrong for Rishi Sunak?
Well, I think the interesting poll finding probably came out actually when MPs were still narrowing down the candidates to be Sunak versus Truss. So I think YouGov came out with a series of polls of Conservative Party members when MPs were still deciding which candidates to go through, showing Sunak losing fairly decisively to almost any of the other candidates by margins of sort of 55 to 45 or 60-40 or 70-30. So Sunak was always in this slightly strange position where he was doing very well among the MPs, but the party membership largely sort of turned against him. And I think they turned against him partly because his spring statements, so his sort of pre-budget announcements earlier in the year, committed to various sort of tax rises, which Conservative members really don't like. But also he was seen as fairly pivotal in bringing down Boris Johnson, who even amidst all of his scandals, Conservative Party members still quite liked Boris Johnson, and they still resented MPs who had a part in bringing him down. And Liz Truss was very clear to be upfront from the beginning that she was loyal to Johnson throughout.
Right. Let me also get in John Kampfner at this point. John, what, according to you, will be her immediate priority in terms of reforms? She has said that she will turbocharge the economy, she'll deal with the energy crisis head on, and also deal with the cost of living crisis. What, according to you, would be the first reform or first priority for her?
The first 5 priorities are all going to be the same. It is to keep the ship afloat over this incredibly difficult winter that the UK and Europe and further afield people are going to face, with energy spikes of 200% already and future ones planned for each quarter, with inflation well busting 10% and heading for 15 or higher, a National Health Service on its knees. And that's just the start of the analysis. You could talk about widespread strikes involving all different sectors. It is a monumental in-tray. And the issue that I tend to look at, which is the UK's role in the world and the international agenda, that will struggle to get a hearing. But she is absolutely spoiling for a fight with the European Union, which I think is a disastrous position, but it is one that she believes holds the key to her re-election among Conservatives and Brexiteers. But on a more positive note, she will continue the UK's, in my view, courageous approach to Ukraine. And that will be I imagine, one of her very first trips to Kiev, and her first major outing more broadly will be to the UN General Assembly in a couple of weeks' time in New York.
Right. Let me get in Dr. Nigel Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher, what, according to you, would be some of the key indicators to look at when it comes to her cabinet? Any key possible choices that you can think of?
Yes, I think the interesting thing is going to be the extent or otherwise of continuity from the Boris Johnson cabinet. We saw, of course, lots of ministers, including Rishi Sunak, resigning from Boris Johnson's government, which brought him down. But before that, there were a number of people who sat in his cabinet and some who came back afterwards, who have backed Liz Truss. And it'd be interesting to see how many of those retain their position, or whether she'll try and make room for supporters of Rishi Sunak to try and unite the party. It's always the case in leadership elections that leaders tend to talk about reuniting the party and coming back together again after a leadership election. But I think it's particularly important in this one, where it's been a very fractious leadership election. They've really taken lumps out of each other during the past few weeks, and to such an extent that I think it seems unlikely that Rishi Sunak will be able to accept a position in Liz Truss's cabinet, even if he's offered one. And so I think that will be a significant challenge for her. And it's notable as well that she made a very clear strategic decision not to resign herself from Boris Johnson's cabinet and to remain loyal to him. And indeed, even in her acceptance speech just now, she was saying that she considers Boris Johnson to be a friend, that she was proud to have served in his cabinet, and so on. So I think that will be an interesting point to note. Is this going to be a continuation of Boris Johnson's cabinet, or will she try to make it a new start by bringing in some people who perhaps were sent to the backbenches during Johnson's leadership?
All right, very interesting take. Let me get in Farooq Dhondi at this time. Farooq Dhondi, what do you feel this means for Rishi Sunak's political career? Nigel had this interesting point to see whether he is offered a cabinet post and whether he eventually takes it or not. But really, what does this defeat mean for his political future?
I don't think that Rishi has a political future in a Liz Truss cabinet. I don't even know why anybody would want a position in Liz Truss's cabinet. It's like wanting to be agricultural secretary at this moment in Pakistan, you know, with the country under flood. It's really, as John Kempner said, this government, from tomorrow, the new prime minister faces an absolutely devastating task of regenerating Britain. All she's ever said right through the campaign and today in her very, very cursory speech, saying, I will cut taxes on the rich so as to allow them to invest and regenerate the economy. It's a dog's whistle for Tories. That's what it means. It doesn't actually practically amount to anything at all. Which taxes is she going to cut? Who is going to invest in the country? How is it going to regenerate itself with the fuel crisis, with the cost of living going up, with lawyers, doctors, teachers, postmen, everyone, firemen, railway workers, all threatening to strike and actually striking, pulling that off. I don't understand, with the gas and fuel prices going up, with food beginning to cost, the NHS being absolutely on its knees, how is she going to revive any economy or Britain at all? It requires some detailed policy, and all she says, I'm going to cut taxes, and that's going to regenerate, inject the new life into the economy. There is no detail yet. Let's see the new cabinet. We call it the Uncle Tom's cabinet. Let's see what happens. With the plans that they have. As far as Rishi is concerned,
very important points there.
He should go back to hedge funding.
All right, Rishi Sunak. Okay, you're saying he should go back to hedge funds, does not have a political future. But John, if I can get you in at this point, all the economic measures that Liz Truss has been speaking about, there have been concerns in the UK, and people have been saying that this will increase the borrowing costs significantly, even though Liz Truss and members of the Conservative Party say there is fiscal headroom to do so. Do you think this will be a trial by fire, in a sense, for Liz Truss? And if she is not able to put the economy back on track, then there will be problems in 2024?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what Farooq Dondi just said in terms of the scale and in terms of the myopia of her package. But she felt that it's a very interesting question about, was a lot of her pitch over the last few weeks a tactic to get her over the line? It was a pretty obvious one, and it has got her over the line. The Conservative members are an incredibly rarefied group of people, constituting 0.3% of the British electorate. So she's got that. Is she now going to change tack? Well, every time we think leaders are going to do that, think Donald Trump, think Boris Johnson, they don't. They actually govern exactly as they campaigned, and she has already said she will do that. Now, will she? I mean, all politicians, all they want to do is to get re-elected. Is her approach conducive to unlocking some miracle cure for growth between now and spring or autumn of 2024? And don't forget, there's always a time lag between economic figures and the way people feel their lives are changing, for better or for worse. So it either has to be an incredible miracle cure, or this ideology is going to land the Conservatives in the wilderness in 2 years' time. But the other point that I think is really interesting about her, I mean, she is the self-styled Thatcherite for an Instagram age, and she is absolutely obsessed with this idea of disruption. She looks at a world that is hugely disrupted, international institutions, authoritarian regimes, economic models, you name it, they're not working, and we do not have a world at peace or prosperity. And her answer is not to reassure, it's to disrupt further. And it's one of those things, if you're in the casino and you're losing, you just gamble more. Does that win? Who knows? But it's a sort of devil-may-care approach in terms of, I've only got 2 years and I'm going to leave my mark.
Right. Right. Adam, if I can come to you, what about Boris Johnson? Do you think there is a chance that Boris Johnson, Adam, may return as Prime Minister of UK in future?
It's really down to what he does. I think to an extent, he and his allies are gambling that Truss is going to be a complete failure and everything's going to collapse, and then the Tory party will do what it did in 2019, which is stare into the abyss of getting 9% in a national election and, turn to the only solution that they've had in the past. But Boris Johnson's approval rating when he announced his resignation was about 20%. So he is not anywhere near as popular as he was. There's also, I think, the interesting question of whether he just wants to go and make a lot of money. He would complain apparently quite frequently while he was Prime Minister about how little the job paid by comparison to his lifestyle and the expenses he has. So the suggestion that has been made is that he will basically spend a couple of years rebuilding his bank balance and getting into a comfortable financial position, and then maybe see how things are going. But the real question is it's partly up to Liz Truss and whether or not she provides the space for Johnson to come back. And as my fellow panelists have been saying, the in-tray that is facing her looks really quite daunting, and it wouldn't be that difficult to imagine her failing.
All right, we're going to take a short break, but we'll request all our guests to stay with us. We'll be right back, and when we come back, we'll discuss Liz Truss's approach towards India, the free trade deal with India as well. Don't go anywhere. This discussion continues on the other side.
गाड़ी भी फिक्स करवा दो।
अपना फोन दीजिए, मिलिए अपने नए एडवाइजर से 5 पैसे।
अरे वाह।
सर जी, ऐसे करते हैं ऑप्शंस ट्रेडिंग।
Investment in securities market are subject to market risk. Read all related documents carefully before investing.
Welcome Welcome back. I am still in conversation with John Kampfner, Executive Director at Chatham House, Adam Drummond, Associate Director and Partner, Opinion Research, Nigel Fletcher, Political Historian at King's College London, and writer and columnist Farooq Dhondi. Dr. Fletcher, if I can come to you, Liz Truss, her first foreign visit is set to be the United States for the UN General Assembly. What, according to you, will be the big priority for her? What would she like to achieve?
Well, I think, as has been said before, her in-tray is fairly crowded with things on the domestic front, but also in international affairs. And I think she is lucky in a way that as Foreign Secretary, she has a bit of a head start. We sometimes have prime ministers coming to office who have quite a rude awakening in having to get up to speed on international affairs. She at least has the opportunity to draw on her experience as Foreign Secretary. I think she'll be wanting to ensure that the relationship with the United States remains as close as both sides always try to say that the UK and the US should be the special relationship, although that phrase sometimes goes in and out of fashion. But I think Ukraine clearly is the major issue. She's been very hawkish on Russia. She's been at the forefront of putting in sanctions. And so I think she'll be very keen to burnish those credentials as a hawk on Russia in relation to Ukraine. You say her first visit will be to the UN. I think it's a fair bet that pretty soon after that, she will probably be going to Ukraine to meet President Zelensky. It's interesting that Boris Johnson had clearly a very good personal relationship there with President Zelensky, and I think Liz Truss will want to demonstrate that she has a similar personal relationship as well. Easier for her to do that, having been loyal to Boris Johnson. But of course, I think there's a whole range of other issues. It's been touched on before that in relation to relations with the European Union, she's going to face a number of issues there in relation to Northern Ireland and so on. But I think from her experience, we sometimes forget she is actually, although comparatively young, she is the longest serving member of the cabinet. She first joined the cabinet under David Cameron and has served in many positions in the cabinets of David Cameron and Theresa May and Boris Johnson. So she's a very experienced cabinet minister, but having been first International Trade Secretary and then Foreign Secretary, she does have that advantage. And so going to the UN in a few days' time, she's perhaps much better briefed than a lot of prime ministers would be.
Right. That is right. She has a lot of diplomatic experience behind her. Farooq Dhondi, when it comes to India, what will be her big approach? We have been reading columns about how she would be as committed as Boris Johnson to having a trade deal with India by Diwali. What, according to you, will be her approach to India amid the current geopolitical crisis that we're looking at?
I think she'll be desperate for a trade deal with India, because after Brexit, any trade deal, right? Any trade deal with Nicaragua, for instance, would assist the British economy, because it has suffered through its severance with the European Union. The other thing is she is being very tough in her statements on the European Union. She says, she will cancel the Irish protocol, which Boris Johnson signed. It will worsen relationships with the EU. There'll be trade sanctions in that direction. And so she'll be desperate to continue and expand the trade relations with India and other non-European countries. That's absolutely clear. So she won't only continue the policy, I think she'll make far-ranging concessions and mutual treaty agreements with India for trade.
Right. Let me get in Adam once again. Adam, now we have spoken about her priorities in great detail. Give us a sense, will she also have the task of rebuilding the image of the Conservative Party in the eyes of the British voter after what happened with Boris Johnson, with Partygate?
Well, the main thing, as John and Nash, I believe, have mentioned is that you've got this enormous energy bills crisis coming down the tracks. So everybody has kind of priced in that there was going to be some sort of major intervention by the government. So you would assume and expect, and from our perspective, hope that she will be doing something along those lines. The question is whether or not that boosts the Conservative Party or whether it is just expected and it's the bare minimum. The other point is that, of course, when the Conservatives won in the 2019 election, it was a very disparate group of different types of voter that they pulled together. They had social conservatives who want a big state and lots of spending on healthcare, etc. And then you had small state liberals who want lower taxes above everything else and to cut back on social spending, etc. So Boris Johnson managed to coalesce those different groups together who have really quite different priorities. Liz Truss, from everything that she said so far, seems to come down very clearly on one side of that divide, the small state side of things. So it's a question of whether or not her first major acts are going to be completely in contravention of her political instincts in having to enact a massive sort of bailout of households and firms to help them get through the winter. More generally, though, there's the fact that the Conservatives have been in power since 2010. There's a definite feeling of sort of tiredness and exhaustion to the party. Maybe a new prime minister can bring a sense of energy to things, and essentially they do have sort of fresh ideas. But generally, sort of the sort of political pendulum and time is not really on their side.
Right. My final question to John. When it comes to China, what, according to you, will be her approach?
It will be, or at least she is flagging it to be, very similar to her Russia approach. Previously, there was a thing called the Integrated Review, which was the security and defence review that the British government's come up with every 5 years. The last one, which was issued in March 2021, so only 18 months ago, she's ordered that to be rewritten. It stated that China was a systemic rival or a systemic competitor to the UK, which is fairly standard language. The EU uses similar language. She wants to call it now an acute threat, putting it on the same level. Now, this is with Russia. Now, this is, of course, rhetoric. And there's only the Brits are very good at hubris and at hyping their role in the world. And for me, one of the really important signs of a country growing up is a country that knows exactly where it is. And so the Brits have only got a certain amount of traction with China. They should definitely, they will be folding very much behind the United States and now Australia and Japan as part of the AUKUS deal in their Indo-Pacific area. But it will be a much more confrontational one. It will much more be a friend or foe, a goodies and baddies, dictatorships and democracies one. And that brings us really interestingly back to the India question, because India is absolutely pivotal to the UK. It is now culturally, it is in terms of having jettisoned our near neighbours as our closest friends, otherwise known as the Europeans. The British are now scratching around looking for who they can have alliances with. And that is predominantly dusting down the Commonwealth. And yet at the United Nations General Assembly, when there was the vote on Russia and Ukraine, pivotal Commonwealth countries led by India and South Africa did not take the view of unequivocal support for Ukraine. They very much hedged their bets. India at the same time has a very fractious and difficult relationship with China. So it will be absolutely, as Farouk said earlier, she will go hell for leather to sign a trade deal with India. Whether or not it's good for British business is moot, because I think the Brits will compromise in order to get it over the line in time for Diwali. But they will do pretty much anything and everything to keep India and other Commonwealth states as close as possible.
All right, we leave it there for the moment, but thank you very much, John Kampfner, Farooq Dhondi, Adam Drummond, and Dr. Nigel Fletcher for joining us here on Global Eye, explaining to the Indian audience the ramifications of this Conservative Party vote in the UK and the appointment of Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.